We have a major update on the 16 Siders children that law enforcement found inside that home on Omer Street in Vinton County more than 3 weeks ago. Vinton County's prosecutor, William Archer, has actually given an update on the status of the children. And from the information Archer provided to county commissioners, it sounds like the Siders family may never be reunited with their children. I'll get to that very shortly. This update comes as questions remain about the physical and emotional condition of the children. That is information we just don't have at this time. We know that all of the children are out of the hospital and in therapeutic foster care. I'll get to what Prosecutor Archer said in this update.
In a rural stretch of southeast Ohio, a case that began with 16 children pulled from a single house has just gotten bigger because investigators have now connected the Siders family to a second property, and what turned up inside tells its own disturbing story. Nearly a month after Vinton County deputies and state investigators descended on a rented home in the tiny village of Hamden on June 30th, 2026, and removed 16 children ranging in age from 18 months to 18 years, reporters combing through property and birth records traced the family back to an earlier address, roughly 10 miles away, near Cheshire in neighboring Gallia County, where the Siders reportedly lived from 2020 to 2024 before relocating to the Hamden house where the children were ultimately found. The man who bought that Gallia County property this past May, a contractor named Bruce Gulick, told a Columbus TV station that when he started renovating, he found children's clothing stuffed away in the attic as if someone had been living up there in secret, and that the rest of the house was...
The house sits on Honeysuckle Drive. A neighbor who did not want to appear on camera told us he remembers the family. He said he thought there were 9 children. This would have been in 2020 or 2021. The neighbor said the family kept to themselves, and while he saw children outside at times, mostly they just stayed in the house. A woman who works nearby told us the house was absolutely trashed by the Siders. She knows the man who owns it. And we previously told you that the man who rehabbed the house told ABC6 in Columbus that the house was full of urine and pet and human
soaked in
feces.
Human and pet waste. A neighbor down the road, Melissa Edmonds, said she barely registered when the family packed up and left, telling reporters the property just sat there empty and trashed for a while before anyone noticed. It's a small detail, but for a case that has already shocked the country, it raises an uncomfortable question: how many houses, how many attics, how many years did this go on before anyone stepped in? To understand why that question matters so much, you have to go back to what deputies say they found on June 30th. According to Vinton County officials, the 16 children had allegedly been confined for roughly the last 4 years to a single room measuring about 12 feet by 12 feet, inside a home shared by 20 family members who reportedly had just one bathroom between them. 7 of the children needed hospital treatment, 2 of them flown out by helicopter to trauma centers, and officials have said some were found in conditions close to life-threatening. None of the 16 had ever been enrolled in school, anywhere, ever. Investigators say the family moved repeatedly across multiple Ohio counties going...
Records show the Siders lived in that home in 2019, possibly for a brief time before moving to the home in Cheshire that we already showed to you. Another family already appears to live here. The Siders had a third address in Gallipolis. The family lived here in 2008, according to records. This is where they lived when Elizabeth gave birth to the couple's first child. That was obviously a very long time ago, so the property may look different than it did then. But the home is surrounded by other mobile homes. And finally, the Siders lived
back to at least 2008, and truancy complaints had already surfaced years earlier. Gallia County's juvenile court opened a truancy case back in October of 2021 after 6 of the children failed to show up.
Yes, to me, if you're not sending your kids to school and you're not homeschooling them, you don't want the people at the school to see these kids. And if a kid is physically or emotionally or mentally somehow abused, people are going to pick up on that real quick at school. The classmates are going to go home and tell their parents, so-and-so came to school today, and either she told me this or I noticed this about her, and word's going to get out. So I think that would be the main factor. These parents don't want people to realize what's going on in the house, and the best way to do it is to keep the kids at home so no one can see them or talk to them.
At Adaville Elementary. So this wasn't a family that slipped through the cracks quietly. There were paper trails, there were neighbors, there were officials who had, at some point...
Well, I don't know how the county children's services agencies communicate with each other, but you mentioned 4 different moves. if there's one visit from a children's services agency and things are bad and you know they're bad, I can see why the family thinks, you know what, we got to get out of town. We got to move on to someplace else. And maybe that's the reason why they kept moving around, because they knew that children's services agency is going to come back knocking on the door again. And we don't want to be here when they do that. I mean, to me, that would be a good reason for the parents to keep moving around, be like gypsies, or talk to them.
We had been told very early on that Children's Services in Gallia County had some type of contact with the family. We didn't know the exact nature of it, but then I was able to kind of verify that. So I've got that from at least two sources that Gallia County CPS had kind of had some type of contact with this family, and then boom, they take off. That in and of itself is pretty concerning, because they moved just one county north.
Been aware something was off. What nobody caught until this summer was the scale of it. The 4 adults arrested that day were Gary Siders Jr., who is 36, his wife Elizabeth Siders, 33, and Gary Jr.'s parents, 73-year-old Gary Siders Sar and Christina Siders, who is in her 60s. All 4 are charged with second-degree felony child endangering, 16 counts apiece, 1 for every child in that house. Gary Jr. is also facing a separate set of charges, 4 counts of public indecency, tied to allegations that he exposed himself outside the home in the final week of May, weeks before the search warrant was ever executed. Investigators have said the raid itself actually grew out of a parallel investigation into domestic abuse and neglect allegations, and it's believed deputies may also have been trying to serve Gary Jr. with that indecent exposure warrant, when they instead walked into a scene Vinton County's prosecutor has since called one of the worst he's encountered in his career. Elizabeth, Gary Jr., and Christina are each being held on $300,000 bond at the Southeastern Ohio Regional Jail. Gary Sutter is the only one out, released after being hospitalized for what's been described as a serious medical condition. If he's discharged, he'll be required to wear a GPS monitor, though prosecutors have said they don't consider him a flight or safety risk in the meantime. His attorney has since filed a motion asking for a competency evaluation and raised the possibility of an insanity defense, which a judge has granted, effectively pausing the speedy trial clock on his case while that plays out. All 4 defendants waived their preliminary hearings back on July 7th, and the case is now headed to a grand jury under a newly appointed special prosecutor. Since Vinton is a small county that only convenes a grand jury periodically rather than continuously like a bigger jurisdiction would, no trial date has been set for any of the 4, and the investigation is described as still expanding.
We'll find out more information about that in the future. What do you think is going on with this investigation right now? There's been talk about downloading electronic devices. There's been talk about a computer crime section with the AG's office being involved in this case. And plus, the interviews of many family members.
I think, number one, they're doing physical and mental examinations of the kids, just trying to see how seriously they are abused. If they are doing computer searches on them, then that tells me, again, just from my experience, I know you said it too, we don't know what is out there, but the only reason you would be doing that, in my experience, is looking for some kind of either sex videos that they're downloading and sharing with the kids, or maybe sex videos that they're producing with the kids. And again, I've had cases like that before, where the parents are physically having sex with 2 and 3 and 4-year-old kids, and then posting that online and sharing it with other people who will share their similar videos with them. And those kids are ruined for life that are put through that. I mean, again, just from my experience, it's hard to recover from that kind of abuse. And you're going to turn out to be that kind of abuser in the future. Again, from my experience, that if that's how you're brought up, if that's what you're taught, that's going to be your life.
And that is so incredibly awful. And I hope to God we don't find out that that's what's happened here. But, we have to wait and see.
At least on that particular charge. Meanwhile, the bigger financial and logistical toll of this case is becoming its own story. On July 14th, Vinton County's prosecutor went before the county commissioners in a public, recorded weekly meeting and asked for an additional $20,000 just to help his office keep up, on top of the roughly $1 million in emergency funding Ohio's controlling board had already approved days earlier to cover the children's care. He told commissioners the case had, in his own words,
I could see one thing is if he pleads him guilty, I mean, there's got there's evidence that could be used against him in the future on other crimes. And a public indecency is a weird charge. The fact that people are outside exposing themselves, and if there's some kind of sex offenses coming down the road, that you wouldn't want to have your client already admit to a sex offense, and then they can bring that up in the other case. That's one possible thing. The other thing is just, it's a small county. I'm sure everybody's following this case. And again, if he would go to court on this case, it's going to keep him in the mind of the public, and they're going to remember that down the road if there's more serious charges that he has to go to trial on. So I can see him not wanting to do anything on the case until he knows everything.
Taken on a life of its own, that he's pulling in help from a neighboring county's prosecutor's office on a volunteer basis and getting some assistance from the Ohio Attorney General's office. But that neither would cover everything a case of this size demands from a county this small and this financially stretched. He also confirmed something that's arguably the biggest development of the last 2 weeks. The 16 children are now the subject of a separate juvenile court case, and the state is seeking permanent custody of all of them. Not temporary, not a plan to reunify once the parents complete some program. Permanent. For context, that is not the outcome children's services agencies typically pursue first. Reunification with a birth family is almost always the starting goal in dependency proceedings, and permanent custody is usually reserved for.
Take a listen.
I'm making a request for a separate line item for the Siders case. I'm asking for $20,000. If we don't spend it, it'll go right back to you guys. But I'm going to have overtime and things that I'm going to have to. A case of this magnitude is not an easy thing to do, and I can't ask Anika's staff to do work, and the AG's office is providing some assistance. They've got their own caseloads as well. And just so you know, this is not just about the criminal case. There's also the children's services case, which we will be asking for permanent custody of all 16 kids. So we've got that case. Our related cases that started all of this that's going to be involved as well. And then we may do something about the house and the people who are trespassing into the house. So it really has got a life of its own. And so I'm asking the county's commitment.
Getting those kids back. This is a weekly meeting.
And it sounds like, and again, I had a similar case in Hamden County. The Crafts, Robin and I forget the dad's name, but we both went to trial on both of them. They were sexually abusing their kids and putting it over the internet. And those kids, Hamden County got permanent custody of those because there's no way they were ever going to give them back. And in fact, the parents will both die in prison because of the sentences they got. So it's a very unique situation to seek permanent custody, because the main goal of Children Protective Services is to reunite the kids with the parents. But if a situation is that bad that you should never do it, and to do it that quick, it tells me it had to be a horrible situation.